Welcome to this presentation and demonstration on Selenium and Playwright servers in Smithery with MCP. In this session, we will explore how MCP servers are revolutionizing browser-based testing with AI agents. We will be using an AI agent, or it's also called MCP client, called Claude Desktop. It is the tool that receives your AI prompts and converts the request or query into structured JSON commands to dialogue with the respective MCP server. Some of the common actions that take place because of the AI prompts are listed here. All of these actions are possible with a single AI prompt request or query. Before you begin conducting tests with Method Context Protocol or MCP support, you must make sure your local test environment is ready. Testing is changing. With MCP, AI agents can now write, run, and analyze tests live. Normally, for automation testing with Playwright or Selenium, you need an IDE installed that supports your programming language of choice. That is not necessary for MCP testing, but you do need Selenium and Playwright installed to enable the MCP server to interact for script creation and execution. You can find some appropriate MCP servers for these products located on a site called Smithery.ai. I will do a short demo on this video on navigating through Smithery.ai to locate the MCP tools registered there. Be aware that Smithery.ai can not only install the MCP servers, but it updates configuration in the selected AI agent like Claude. I have already installed and updated Playwright tools, so I won't be detailing the installs for Playwright and the MCP server Playwright. However, when I demo Smithery.ai, I will talk more detail on Selenium. One more item. If you have never used your local machine for testing, it is possible that you will need to do much more installs to set up a test environment starting with an IDE. I am not going to go into detail on this. You can find YouTube videos that can help you with this process, or you can search for install information for either test tool. In this overview of MCP testing, I want to point out what else you can expect in this video. Testing with MCP requires two MCP tools. One we call the MCP client or host, and one we call MCP server. MCP servers do the exposing of testing tools to MCP client or host. This allows the tools to generate, execute, and interpret tests dynamically and intelligently. Normally, you write Playwright code or Selenium code to create test scripts and then execute them in an IDE environment. But with MCP, the test tool is abstracted. The test scripts are generated in the background. The MCP client and server dialogue with each other to drive the test tool. If there are errors, they are handled in the dialogues provided the error conditions can be resolved. This is why there is a workflow that is dynamic and intelligent. We have reached the first demo session. After this slide, we will enter my lab and review more about Smithery.ai. Be aware that you can install MCP software with Smithery.ai, but I have found it to be a lifesaver. I was having trouble trying to install the first MCP server until I discovered Smithery. So this is why I highly recommend its use. Smithery is not the only MCP registry site. There are others, but Smithery appears to be the largest at present. With thousands of MCP servers and the ability to install and configure multiple AI agents like Claude, I'm happy with it. Smithery makes setup easy. I say that with one caveat. It seems that some MCP servers may have been registered with security measures like Selenium. I did not have any concern with Playwright, but as part of the Smithery demo, I will try to help you with Selenium in Smithery. Let's move on to the demo. See you in the lab. Welcome to my lab. Here we are at the Smithery.ai site. I intend to give you a short demonstration of the tool, mostly highlights, and I want to cover a little bit about Playwright as well as a little bit about Selenium, both of the testing tools that I'm going to do two separate demonstrations in this video about those and experiences that I had with those tools. Now, let me start with the home page here, talking about a few things on it. First of all, you can see across the top of the screen docs. This is intended to be a way to look at documentation. Let it run just for a second, and you can see, not yet. Let me click on that. There. Now, here you can see that there's documentation, quite a bit of information. I'm just going to scroll real quick on this subject so that you can get a lot of information about MCP, registering your MCP servers, and so on, and how to use the Smithery site completely. I'm going to close that, go back to the main page here, and that was the docs. Explore is a lot like the home page, where it allows you to search for whatever particular MCP server you're looking for. There's over 7,000 MCP servers that have been registered on this site, and this site is only a few months old. I think it was started around the beginning of 2025, this year. So be aware that there are plenty available for use, and they may not be some that you're interested in. If we go down this particular page, I'm not going to do it just yet, I'm going to do it when I come back, but down this particular page you will see it listed by categories, and you'll see what categories I'm talking about. But Explore shows it in a slightly different way, and let's go over to that location. Now, here we are. We have the search box as well, and I will be putting in the word Selenium momentarily so we can look at that. And you can just scroll down and you can see some, I don't know if it's just featured, and it then will go from page to page, and there's over 360 pages available to scroll through. to look at all of these MCP servers in a different format. Now, I want to point out, I'll just use this for now to point out some characteristics here of what it shows you. First of all, you have the name, and you can click on that to go to the details for that particular server. It also gives you a description. It also has an internal name that's used in the configuration, and it tells you whether it can be used locally or remotely. But because it tells you that, I think it could only tell you one or the other. That means it can also possibly, not absolutely, but possibly be used remotely if it specifies local, or local if it specifies remote. So that depends on the operating systems that are involved. These are located on a Linux machine, and so some of them may not work the same way, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, so I'll leave that for later. Another stat you will see here is a number that indicates how many are called upon or utilized by month. So that means over 1 million uses per month. Here, over 28,000 uses per month for these particular servers that I'm pointing to. All right, now I want to go back and then come back to this one. I just want to make sure that you know what's on the main page. I mentioned not only the search box, but you have categories. So there's featured, and it gives you a count of how many, or you can view all of them for that category. And popular, web search, memory management, browser automation. This is the one we're focusing on. This is where we will find the Playwright, at least one Playwright server, and at least one Selenium server. And I'll show you the ones that I selected and make use of for the demonstrations of testing with those servers. And then the last thing is AI image generation. I'm sorry, not the last. Platform API integrations. So, and you can see how many, right here, how many are in that category. And again, you can view all of them, or you can just scroll to the right and see them one by one and until you find what you're looking for. So that's one way to look at it on the home page. The other way is just to go to the Explorer and explore there. We're going to type in Selenium. So we're going to just see, well, we're supposed to see just the servers that have the name Selenium in it. However, you will see more than that. And let's not worry about that. It's not a perfect search engine, I guess. But basically, this is the one that I use. So I'm pointing right now to the one called MCP-Selenium. This is the Selenium MCP server that I selected to go along with my Claude client. And it is designed for local use. There's over roughly 50 users per month so far. That number will raise, I'm sure, in the future. However, as I said, there are several Selenium servers, and at this point, I don't know, I can't tell from this information without going into more detail, looking at all the documentation to determine, is this one a better fit for my need? I chose this one. It seems to work okay. I will talk about some of the features that are okay and some that might not be. Okay, so in order to select this one, you just simply go to this link. Now, if you select it as is, well, it's just going to go display on top of this particular page. I'm going to right click on it and open it in a separate tab. And let's go to that one when it's ready now. And here we are. We still have the same information up at the top. By the way, I'll take a moment just to mention that you can set up an account on it. I did, but I didn't need to. Is that right? No, that's wrong. You can set up an account because in some cases you're going to need an API key for some of these servers, and so that will require you to have an account on this particular site. So click on that. It also has an option for my servers. I don't have any servers. I have not deployed any servers, and so that's a no server found kind of thing if I select that. Configuration profile, that's basically your account information. And if you have any API keys, it will show you here. I'm not going to go there. I'm not supposed to show the API key, so I will leave that alone. All right, we'll continue here. We have several pieces of information that I want to point out to you. Again, the local, and this is that name, that internal name. You can copy that information, and you can go to the home page. I think both of these get you to the GitHub location where the source code is located and more documentation, and we will go there momentarily. You also have a couple more links that you can go to other pages associated with this particular Selenium WebDriver automation tool or server. And this information further down here, to the right especially, is a continuation of more information, and this is where you go to actually install, and I did that. I will step you through that so you're aware of it, what to expect. Even though it tells you, look like something went wrong, but it says this server works best locally. I really didn't let that sink in when I first came here. When I first came to the site, I was thinking that everything was remote because it was registered on this Smithery.ai server. Not so. I showed you where it will tell you if it's local, intended to be used for local, or intended for remote, and it might be vice versa, but that's not always the case. Let me step further and show you something. So we click the continue, and now we see install information for this server. And so we have 3 tabs: auto, JSON, URL. I will show you each one of those, but I want to point out, let me scroll up, one little bit more, here we go. And so we see at least 5 clients that we can utilize installing this particular server. This is the Selenium server. So I'm going to be using Claude Desktop, but you could, this is another client that you can use that's popular, and VS Code is also popular. I'm not familiar with the other two, but I am familiar with VS Code, but I like Claude Desktop, and so I went this route. So before I click on this, let me just click real quick to JSON. This is where you see the server, or I'm sorry, the client configuration information, and over at the URL is where you can see an install statement or install command for Smithery. And this is the one that you use to actually install. I'm sorry, that's not the case. This is the URL associated with running the MCP server online or from the Smithery site. Hopefully you understood that. Now, granted, it is identified as a local one, but you can use it online. However, what will happen is if your client, if your machine is not running Linux, then this will not work. It will attempt to run, but it will fail because the browser it's looking for is on a path that would be on a Linux operating system environment. So you don't want to use this if you don't have a Linux machine. If you do, go for it. Okay, now let's back up and go back to auto. And what I did was I came to Claude Desktop, and then what did I do? And you'll see this is the command to actually install the server, but not install it on your local machine. This installs or makes a connection between Smithery and let me scroll to the right, and the Selenium server. And so it makes that connection with Claude. And when you run that, it will then update Claude's configuration data with that configuration information I showed you a moment ago. And there's the key. I'm not going to go all the way there. Not supposed to be sure. That's that API key again. All right, so looking a little further down here, this is further information. You've seen that before when this was published. This particular one was put out there in February of this year. And there is a link to the source code here, and it's in a couple of other places as well. I think what I want to do is actually go there from here. Yeah, let me just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click on that. Let's put that out there in tab as well. Let me close this other one. We don't need that one. And there we are. We're at the GitHub site for MCP-Selenium. It was done by, the author was Angie Jones. She's out there with some videos as well on the subject. And if we scroll down, the source is in this area here. It's a JavaScript module. And there's other information that comes with that package. Here we are. We have a link here. The interesting thing about this link is not for Smithery.ai. The link is for another registry area. Let me do something here. Move this. Okay, now I should be able to see that. I'm going to right click on that and open another tab. And we'll go to that momentarily. And I think it's ready now. Okay. We're talking about MCP Selenium, but this is on another registry site called Glama, I guess I'm pronouncing that correctly, .ai. And it's a similar site to Smithery, has its search component, and it has a number of servers out there, MCP servers, and it just so happens that Angie Jones loaded it out on multiple sites, namely Glama and on Smithery. So on Glama, you actually see much more documentation. That part I kind of like. You also see that the code is JavaScript, and there's some other tabs. I'm not going to go through much on this. I mainly wanted to show you that there's more documentation out there. You have to look for some of these things. And just like there are multiple servers, there's plenty different ways to utilize them. I want to point out that there's yet another tool called Goose, and this is the information for that. We're not interested in that particular thing, but what I am interested in is this is the local command for installing the local MCP Selenium server. This is the command there, and this is the configuration data that you use and that I used to put into Claude to communicate with that particular server locally. And because of NPX, it's going to execute that local MCP server. So that works out nicely for those who want to use that particular Selenium server. And there's more information down here about it. There again, it's pointing back to Smithery, letting you know this is the command to install it, to connect from Claude to Smithery. Claude to Smithery. And then it would also have the API key attached to the end of that command. This is another command for installing. The only difference, one is using -G and the other one is using -Y. -Y just says, hey, yes, to any prompts, any questions, just respond yes in the install. The G is actually, I want to install this globally, so everybody on my machine can use that particular server. That's the differences, no big deal. And if you wanted to manually start it, you can do that. So you can start the server manually, locally, but you don't have to because you're using NPX in Claude in the configuration data, and it will start it. It will find it and start it. So that's good. I think, let me look and see if there's more. Yeah, I wanted to mention something else here. If you notice here, it talks about tools, and it Start Browser is one of the tools within the Selenium server that was developed. The tools are a lot like, in MCP, tools are a lot like a programming language class or function or method. That is what the tools are for Selenium. So in your Selenium or your MCP server code, you would actually have one or more tools, and those are interacted with between the client and the server. So just be aware of that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And this one is showing that it is designed for both Chrome and Firefox. And I may not have mentioned, but I was only able to get it to work for Firefox, not for Chrome. It couldn't find Chrome. It was able to find Firefox, and they both were basically in the same areas. However, in the tool, or because of the tool Start Browser, you can add parameters to give more definition to what you want that particular tool to be able to do. So in your configuration, you can add more data, more keyword value pairs to actually interact with that particular tool. And I think that might be what it needs to be able to work with Chrome. I have not tested this. I plan to, but I have not tested this for this video. Okay, and then it goes into more detail about each of the tools and some of the configuration information that you can add to tailor that particular tool within the MCP server. That's an interesting thing, and you might want to take some time and look at that in more detail. And if I think I need to, I may add another video to talk in more detail about that and maybe test some of that to demonstrate it. Okay, I think we're done with the MCP, with the Selenium. Let's go back to, I'm going to close this out, and I want to scroll real quick. There's one of the videos for Selenium and Angie. And features, it goes into talk in more detail. Some of this I've already talked about, so I'm not going to go any further with that. But a lot of that documentation we saw on Glamour is in here at the GitHub site. So you can find documentation in both places, although Smithery is a little light on the documentation. All right, this time we want to talk about Playwright, and I'm probably not going to talk as long about this as I did with Selenium. All right, here are the Playwright, and let's see if I can find the one that I used was, there it is, Automata Labs, sorry about that. And it has something like 293 uses per month, whereas there's one that's actually one from Microsoft, and I didn't see it at first. I probably would have went for that one. That may be the best one to go for. I'm not sure, because there is another one here, and it's had about 30,000 uses per month. This one is 108,000 use per month. So this one is more widely used than the other Playwright servers. But this one, I saw, my eyes caught that one, I decided to use it, and it worked nicely. I really appreciated it. But this one may have more tools, as we talked about. There may be more tools than what you will see here. All right, let's select that one, because that's the one that I will do a demonstration on a little bit later in this video. And again, you see the overview, tools, API. Let me go to, let's see here. And you'll see that this one is intended for local usage. And so there isn't a place to go to set up from Smithery. And let's see, the tools, go there. There's some documentation you can go to. I'm not going to do that now. I didn't create an API for this one, but you can generate one. But it didn't look like it was needed, wasn't necessary. But right from here, I want to go to the GitHub. So this is that internal name, and it's called MCP-server-playwright. And this is the site. I'm going to go there momentarily, show you a little bit of information there, and then I will be done with this demonstration of Smithery.ai. Okay, let's go there. And you can see here, I believe the source, where is it? Did I pass it up? I believe it uses TypeScript code. Yeah, I think it's in, it might be in this one. I don't see it right now, but that's not important right now. You can come back and look at that. All right, then there's I'm not sure where this one takes you. Let's see if that takes us to the same place, or does it take us to the Glamour? Yeah, you can see it takes us to Glamour. So this one also is loaded onto the Glamour AI registry site as well. So it's registered in both of those particular registry sites. And we go down, we can see that there's feature, install information, configuration information, what the components are about, and license information. And you scroll down, excuse me, and you can see the command for Smithery to connect. So it does give you an online connection capability. And even though it says local, and you also have the local install capability. So once again, to remind you, the install, this install versus that install. This is the local, this is the remote. It connects you to Smithery and actually runs the server from the Smithery site. And it connects you to Claude. All right? I'm not going to go into any further information, but it gives you more data. This is definitely important. This is where the configuration file is for Claude, and that's where that configuration information I showed you before would go. And I think if I scroll down, you will see this is for, I know this is for the local install of this server as opposed to the remote. The remote, once you, that's not the one. Once you do the remote install, then you don't have that server on your desktop or laptop, but you do have the client, Claude, and you're executing it from there, and it opens the server version of that server. All right, this is all I'm going to talk about from this. Hopefully you had enough information that you can go back and take a look at both sites, the Smithery.ai and also Glamour.ai, and I think you will find many servers that you might want to make use of. Thank you for your time on this demonstration. I hope the demo was useful to you. We'll have 2 more demos to come. Now, let's move on with the presentation again. This chart I thought is helpful in understanding that all MCP servers designed to provide the same services are still not alike. I went into this MCP server test project thinking that the 2 test tool servers would be very similar. That is not the case, and it really does not need to be. The programming or program development world does not require that. It is meant to be creative. So here is the real scoop. If you use the same AI agent as Claude Desktop for an MCP client, the server experience will be different. There are at least 4 configurations that are possible. I thought the test servers were both remote servers. Nope. The Playwright MCP server I chose was a remote server, true, and it ran without a local install. The Smithery.ai location where it was located provided the service in real time. In contrast, the Selenium MCP server needed to be installed locally and started manually on my local machine. As I'm showing here, there are at least 4 ways the MCP servers can be designed, and variations are possible too. You need to know this. It is possible to have issues because the documentation did not make that clear. This is an emergency. I must stop here. We are over my time limit. This video presentation and demonstration will continue in a separate video entitled MCP Selenium and Playwright Servers in Action. There, I will start with the MCP server configuration spiel you just saw, and we will continue with the demonstrations. See you there.